Is there a strategy that'll help you grow your company faster? CEO Sales Strategies is an investigative business podcast for entrepreneurial people who never stop asking questions. Highly acclaimed sales revenue growth expert Doug C. Brown interviews CEOs, business owners, and professionals who serve them to uncover and share actionable tips and methods behind their bulletproof sales strategies. Topics covered on the show include their failures, struggles, secrets, and processes that help them succeed in selling millions to billions of dollars of their products and services, all with the sole aim of helping you grow your business. If you are eager to know the most effective sales secrets from the A players of the game, then the CEO Sales Strategies podcast is certainly the place to be.
Hey everyone, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies podcast, and we're going to talk today about strategy versus tactics and transitioning from a founder's position to a founder CEO strategy. We're also going to talk about pricing strategy today versus just pricing and what you do in all three areas, because strategy is the key before you start implementing tactics. Now, why do I say that? Strategy creates the leverage because it gives you the opportunity to say, this is what we're going to be great at, and this is what we're not going to focus on. And so many people are focused on way too many things. They don't have the leverage in their business, and therefore they're kind of building a business on their back. Now, they can build a business on your back for many reasons, but strategy is where it all starts from what I know. So we have an expert. His name is Bruce Eckfeldt. And Bruce calls himself a strategic coach. I call him a strategic expert. He's very well spoken, knows his stuff cold. Let's go to the interview right now. We'll talk to Bruce and get your paper out, get your pen out, do all that good stuff, digital notepad, whatever. If you're driving, don't do that, please. But really take copious notes here. You're going to learn something really great. Here we go. Hey, Bruce, welcome to the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Doug. Appreciate it. Pleasure.
So, folks, those of you who don't know Bruce, he's a strategy coach, right? I me's a strategic coach. Yep. Why don't you tell people what you do so I don't have to do it in the intro?
Yeah, that's fine. I was originally an architect, but I got into software, founded a tech company. So I went through the whole founder CEO process, sold my company. And for the last, almost 10 years now, I've been focused on helping founders, CEOs, their leadership teams really figure out how are they going to differentiate themselves in the market, and then how we're going to grow and scale the business. So I kind of joke half my job is business model, then half my job is therapy. It's really kind of working with these teams on how to execute on that.
So I think that's important. You gave that distinction because I would have done that in the intro. So thanks for doing it for me. But, you know, a lot of people call themselves a coach, but they've never owned a company. Yep. Right. So you've been there, done it, sold it, moved on, decided to help people, be a strategist as well as a therapist in some capacity. Yeah. and I jokingly laugh because, all the consulting and coaching I've done, I've never found a business problem be a business problem. It's always a personal issue that manifests into a business problem. Yeah. So we're going to talk a lot about strategy today on this call. And let's start from the beginning. What's the difference between strategy and tactics?
Yeah. So I think of strategy as being a set of specific choices that we're going to make about how we choose to be in the market, right? So strategy is about how do I focus on a particular set of attributes, particular things that I'm going to be excellent at in the market in terms of what customers are looking for. And more importantly, what are all the things I'm willing to suck at, if you kind of use a Francis Fry kind of approach to this, right? Like if you look at kind of the blue ocean strategy, white space analysis kind of process, it really is a set of choices, right? And the reason that I frame it as a set of choices, because it's a set of choices that you have to make as an organization that then translate down into all of your operational decisions, right? So the strategy is the choices we're making about how we're going to choose to be in the market. Tactics are the things that I do operationally to own that position. Right. So we talk about, if you look at kind of the operational capacity or operational activities, activity fit maps, right? They're all kind of describing the things that we excel at operationally that are going to position ourselves, that are going to own that positioning. So when I work with companies, it's who's my core customer, what do the competitors look like, and I want to look for white space. Once I figure out that white space, I then want to figure out, okay, what are the operational capacities, operational capabilities that we need to develop to own that? And then we roadmap that over time. And what I do in terms of implementation of strategy, work with teams on a quarterly basis to put together priorities, objectives, accountability for executing on that so we can make that true.
So when it comes to tactics, the tactics of the deployment side of the process. So strategy is, what are the outcomes that we want?
Yeah. What's the position we want to own?
Okay. And so should we have a strategic outcome for every tactic?
So I would say your tactics should be traceable to some kind of strategic decision that you've been making, some choice that you've made around we're going to be excellent at a handful of these things, and we're choosing to not have to be excellent at these things. We're willing to suck at these other things, or at least be whatever the minimum market requirement is for those attributes. And so our tactics, the choices we make in terms of what we're going to implement on a quarter by quarter basis should trace up to those decisions of what we're going to do and what we're not going to do.
I think you brought up a really good point here. It's like, I'm going to use your words, so what are we willing to suck at, right? Like, so what are we willing not to be really proficient or good at is as important or equally as important, this is a question, as those things we are looking to be really good at when it comes to strategy?
I would say that they're certainly the hardest ones. And generally we're looking, if you're a $1 billion company, we can have a very different conversation around where you're going to deploy resources and how you're going to enter a market. But for, an earlier stage growth company, right? So if you're talking about a couple million, couple tens of millions of revenue, you have limited resources, time, energy to be able to really think and execute strategically. So you have to make some choices. And yes, you want to identify the 2 or 3 things that you're going to be known for, you're going to excel at, be exceptional at, but you need to make a conscious decision. And like I said, this is the hardest part, particularly for founder CEOs, right? Like chasing shiny objects is, something they're really, really good at.
Yeah.
But oftentimes that is where you lose your strategic focus, right? You get watered down strategically because you're trying to do too many things. So consciously and deliberately saying, we are going to do only the minimum requirement for the market for these things. Like, so say warranty, right? Like we may decide that, warranty is just not something we are going to try to compete on. So we're going to provide whatever is kind of the minimal warranty we need to have to be able to play in this market. We're not going to try to differentiate ourselves on warranty. And what that does by making that choice, by consciously saying we are only going to meet the minimum requirement for the market, I then free up time, energy, resources, capital that I can then redeploy to those handful of things that I want to be exceptional at.
And should those handful be only 2 or 3 things? Or, because the reason I ask, Bruce, is because when I've worked with, like you said, CEOs who can be shiny object syndrome types, which is quite frankly more than half.
All of them.
I'm being kind, but it's more than half. They can come up with 2 or 3 things in an hour.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And it kind of feels like empty, like crickets are chirping, and then like now they want to fill the void with 2 or 3 more other things, and then so on and so on. So should it only be a limited number of things? And we can talk from, whether you're transitioning from like a founder to founder CEO, but is there a hard, fast rule that you?
Well, so it somewhat depends on what we call a strategy canvas. Like when you do the analysis of the attributes of the market, right? What are the attributes that customers use to make a buying decision, the criteria that they use to make a buying decision, and looking at the competitive landscape, right? What options do they have? So, sometimes it's really obvious. Sometimes we do that map and it's very clear, like there are 2 or 3 things that no one is owning in this market that if we can put our, wood behind those arrows, we're going to really differentiate ourselves. Sometimes it's harder, right? Sometimes there's no clear single one and we're going to look at combinations of one, or we have to educate the market a little bit and figure out how to grow 1 or 2 of these things. But the more focused you can be, the easier it is going to be in terms of operational execution, right? Because it means that you can really decide what are the policies, procedures, capability, IP, technology, things that I need to build. It's going to be much easier to do that if I have a 2 or 3 things rather than 5 or 6 things. It's also going to help with communication through your organization, right? So I always talk about that the hardest part about strategy is communicating it. And if you don't have, if you're trying to do too many things, it means that all your people inside the company are just going to get very confused, right? Because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are executing on strategy, right? You can sit in a conference room as a senior leadership team, come up with all the ideas and documents and diagrams you want, but it's the people at the front lines that are ultimately going to make decisions on what customers actually experience. And if you can't easily communicate that, it's going to be hard. So generally I like to see 2 or 3. If I see more than that, it means that we haven't done the analysis, or we haven't gathered the information that we need to make that decision, or there's something blocking our ability to actually be decisive in that moment. And sometimes that's personality, sometimes that's alignment on the team. There's lots of other kind of factors that come to play. But my goal is 2 or 3.
2 or 3. I always ask CEOs when they start getting this shiny object thing going. I always ask them, I'm like, how many people did you date at one time? Have you ever tried to date 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 people at once? Mm-hmm. Right. And they sort of get it at that point, right? It's kind of like, you better have all the same names because you're going to mess up a conversation. I guarantee it. Right. So we're speaking with Mr. Bruce Eckfeldt, and the company is eckfeldt.com. That's ECKFELDT.com. And that'll be in the show notes. Here we have companies of all shapes and sizes, people are starting, people are, should be starting because they never did, to people who are, billion-dollar corporations. So let's talk about founder to founder CEO strategy when it relates to these strategic outcomes. Well, all right, I'm a new guy. I might have in business, but I might maybe like yourself or myself. We've had companies in the past, but I'm going to restart. But I'm starting new. Maybe it's a new industry, right? What should I be looking for in the terms of strategy, so I can transition now from the founder and eventually into the founder? We'll get to the founder CEO strategy, but right in the beginning, is it the same thing that we just talked about, or is it something maybe I should be looking at a different model or system or something like that?
Yeah, so this is a really important transition that I end up working a lot with in terms of leaders inside companies, is this transition from founder to CEO. So founder, I think of as being kind of startup, right? Like I've got an idea, maybe I've got a first couple clients, right? But as founders, we're really focused on getting something off the ground, right? Like how do I get some kind of solution, some kind of product or service to market and start getting customers, proving that it's creating value, showing that I can make a profit on it, I can deliver it profitably, but the founder, I always say founders are really focused on execution, right? Like how do I make this work? They're very focused on like results around I talk about chasing cash, right? Like I want to get cash into the business. That's how I'm going to create fuel for growth. I'm managing people, right? Like I've got people that I'm directing. I'm telling them kind of what to do and how to do it. I'm creating culture. I'm very focused on sales, and it's very much about cash flow, right? So those are the areas of focus, or the things that founders are kind of concerned themselves with. As you move into a CEO role, really what you're talking about is going from you leading the company to you building a team to lead the company. And in that transition, all of those things need to shift. And a lot of the times I find when companies are kind of stuck, or particularly leaders are kind of stuck, is they haven't successfully moved through those into a CEO role. And it doesn't mean you need to move them all at the same time, but usually if something is hung up, it means that one of those transitions is not happening. So like from an area of focus, I find founders are very focused on execution. Like how do we run the business? How do we get things delivered? CEOs are very focused on strategy, right? Like how do we really differentiate and position ourselves in the market? In terms of the things that they're trying to create impact around, founders are really focused on results. Like I want to generate cash. CEOs are really focused on systems. How do I systematize what I'm doing? How do I create repeatable, scalable processes inside the company? People, I think, is a big one. founders tend to manage, right? They want to be like, okay, this is what you should do. You're in charge of this project. You're in charge of this part of the company. Do this thing. Like, they're very directive. CEOs are very much focused on leading, right? Like, how do we create leadership capacity, right? So it's not about telling people what to do. It's about how do I create capacity inside the organization so we can grow and scale from a leadership point of view. A lot of founders are very great at selling, right? They're in there closing deals, they're meeting with clients, they're coming up with terms, they're innovating on engagements. CEOs are very focused on marketing, right? It's like, how do we really communicate, identify segments, meet those segments? If I see a CEO in a sales meeting, something's gone wrong, right? They should be really focused on how do we market and position these services, not how do we sell this particular deal. So these transitions, and there's a lot of them, and it doesn't necessarily happen all overnight. They're things that can happen over the course of several quarters, maybe even several years, depending on your growth process and how quickly you're growing. But these are big ones, and honestly, not every leader makes that switch, right? I have a lot of conversations with the leaders I work with where they're doing a lot of founder stuff, and we have to have a conversation is, do you want to do the CEO stuff? And they may not, right? We may decide that actually someone else, or we should bring someone for the CEO role. Let them be the product, the technical product expert. Let them be product development. Let them be the CTO, right? Depending on what they're good at, what they really want to do. And actually having a meaningful conversation around that can be really important, because if we don't have that conversation and they keep trying to shoehorn themselves into that CEO role and they really don't want it, that's going to be a problem. So really kind of figuring that out is important early for a company.
So when I see founder and CEO on a business card, I should be going, hey.
Usually my question is the way I look at it is, you were the founder and now you're the CEO. Right. If you're still trying to do both, that's a problem.
Well, and I 100% agree with you. I just was having a conversation with somebody I've known for years, and not a huge company. They're doing about 4 million a year. Mm-hmm. I helped them when they were 3.5. They went to 4 million in a year. Yep. And disengaged from the process, right? And they wanted to run it on their own. It's been 4 years. They're still at 4 million. Yep. Wasn't all the systems we set up, right? What happened was the founder went back to the founder's thought process and just kept doing what the founder was doing. So I have a question for you, because, a lot of founders have this, no one can do it better than I can.
Oh yeah. Classic.
Right. And I find, not to have alliteration, find founders, feel that they what I have found is that actually just stops them from growing, because in many capacities, because they want control over everything. And it's kind of like they're being a parent on the whole process, right? So how does one, if they're like in that process, how do they identify if they want to be a founder or be a CEO? And second part of the question, how do they let go if they, because it's their baby, they labored over years and years and years to get it to wherever it is. So the first question is, how do they know if they want to be the founder or CEO? That's the first question.
Yeah. So, super common problem, right? Like this, founders, and the fact is they're right. Right. As founders, you can do most of those things better than anyone else. Right. It's not a question of capability. It's a question of capacity. Right. It's that if you keep doing it, we're only going to get so big because you only have so much time and energy. Right. So we have to break that kind of thinking of, well, I'm only going to hand it off if someone else can do it as good as I can, because then it will never work. Right. Like, you have to give up this idea that it has to be done that way, or it has to be done as good. You're going to have to accept at least a different way of doing things. You may have to accept it's not done as well, but that's the only way you're going to grow and scale. So that's kind of one mindset thing that can really shift in terms of figuring out, or do they want that role? I find the best question is, where do they want to go? What do they want? Right. And if the bigger company, if there's something about a larger company that is really important and meaningful for them, that is something we can use to start driving the change process, right? Like, if you look at organizational change, individual change, really it's always a function of, if I can get the reward, the outcome to be worth the pain I have to suffer to go through the change, I will make it.
Yeah.
And so I have to make the reward greater. Like if they're not making the change, it either means that the reward is not great enough, right? We haven't created a situation where they have enough desire for the outcome that a bigger company is going to get them, or we have to reduce the pain, right? We have to reduce the perceived pain that they're going to have to go through to make that change, right? So either it's, I'm afraid of giving something up, or this, I'm not really convinced that it's going to be that great on the other side. Like we've got to go through that process of how do we amp up the benefits of change and how do we reduce the friction or the fear of change? And if we can't do those, then honestly, like sometimes we just say, look, let's keep the company the way it is. Let's just optimize this thing and we'll figure out a couple of products that you can really double down on and, make your $750,000, $1 million a year and, work 30 hours a week. And that's not a bad lifestyle, right? That's totally fine and totally respectable. Not every business and not every founder should grow their company and move into a CEO role, but we have to have that conversation.
So it's really about the end in mind. It's like the old Steve Covey, right? What's truth?
Yeah.
Really when it comes down to. So we want to get to truth and then figure out, okay, if we got to truth, then is that good enough?
Yep. Does that get you what you want?
I found a lot of people can't admit what truth is.
Yeah. Well,
right?
It's hard because, there is pressure. It's like, oh yeah, you should grow your company, or they're, part of, YPO or EO or something. And so they're surrounded by all these folks that are growing their companies and scaling and selling. And, there can be a lot of sort of peer pressure or sort of external motivators, right? And until we find an internal and intrinsic motivator that's really going to drive the growth of the company, it's going to be hard, right? There's a lot that extrinsic motivations falls apart pretty quickly once you run into challenges.
Yeah. So it's really about being happy. Really, when it comes down to it, being happy on a daily basis.
I would say, yeah, so I always have a hard time with happy. I always say engaged, right? Because sometimes the growth process is quite challenging and can be not, you will have difficulties, but sometimes those difficulties are actually what drive engagement, right? Like I find that most successful CEOs, so people that have grown company through the founder stage into CEO stage, to tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, gone to exits. Their real focus is engagement. Like, how do they use the growth part of the company to really engage their skills, capabilities, learning, self-actualization, right? If it's juicing them in that way, I'll see success. And sometimes that happy. I'm not saying that they're not going to be happy, but happy doesn't always do it. Right. Like there's more to, I find most of these people I don't just want to be happy. Like I want to be fulfilled. I want to be challenged. I want to see growth. I want to get to the next level. I want to expand. I want to, that is really the driving motivation on most of those cases.
So it's growth and contribution.
Yeah.
To their own self.
Impact on the world, impact on themselves. Yeah. Like it could be multiple things, but I try to key into that stuff.
All right. So then I'm the founder. I just got my company to, 30 million. I now know I don't want to be the CEO. Mm-hmm. How do I let go safely?
Well, so one thing I always do, I separate out ownership from management, right? So if you are founder, CEO, and you're owner, say you're vast majority shareholder, I separate out, hey, look, as owner, you have certain rights and obligations that we need to keep in place, right? And usually what we do is we set up some kind of board or some kind of quasi-board process that says, as an owner, you're going to be part of a process where executive management, is going to report into you in terms of financials, strategy, KPIs, as owner to show to you, this is what we're doing with your asset. This is how we're using resources. This is how we're growing the asset that we have. And you as owner are going to give feedback and approve and essentially give management authority to run the company. Then we can also then put you back into the company in an executive role. And that's where we're looking at, like, what do you really love to do? Where do you get animated? Where do you get engaged? And that might be, it might be sales, right? Like you may have a founder who just loves to sell. Okay, great. You're going to either be head of sales, or maybe you're just going to be our lead salesperson. We're going to hire a head of sales, but that's what you're going to do on the management side of things. But then, once a month, every other week, whatever our cycle is, the CEO is going to report into you as owner to explain, what are we doing with assets? What are we doing with resources? What's the strategic plan? What are the KPIs we're going to hit? And so you still have your ownership role, and then you have a management role, and we separate those out. I find that's the easiest way to kind of bifurcate that situation where you've got a owner or founder that's also participating in the management role.
It's really interesting. I know a CEO of a $250 million company who's a founder who is their lead salesperson.
Yep.
Right?
Not uncommon.
What he loves to do. Gets down on the floor and he's talking to the people, the other salespeople, when they're like, "Oh, we can't do this. We can't do it." He's like, "Shut up. I'm doing it." Right. So it's interesting. We're speaking with Mr. Bruce Eckfeldt. Bruce is I'm going to call him, I don't think strategic coach actually does you well. I think you're a strategic expert in strategy.
Okay. I like it.
And we are speaking about strategy versus tactics and going from transitioning from a founder to a founder CEO strategy. Let's talk. I get this question a lot. And Bruce, I thought you would be the guy to ask. Pricing versus pricing strategy. If you don't mind sharing your wisdom on this. A lot of times people are looking at pricing and I find many times they've underpriced themselves in their own market.
Yep.
How does one come up with pricing strategy versus just, throwing a price out there?
Yeah. So a couple of things about this. So the first thing or first kind of problem or mistake I think most companies make is they take kind of a cost approach to it, right? They look at the cost of the service, the product they're developing, and then they add 10%, 20%, 50%, whatever they think is a sort of reasonable margin, right? And the problem there, the fundamental problem there is that customers don't care. I don't care what it costs you, right? What customers fundamentally care is what's the value that you create, right? So I'm always looking at how well a company can understand how their product or service creates value for the customer. And that's kind of step one for pricing, meaning what do they do with this thing? And if they didn't have this product or service, what would they not get? What would a customer not get? What additional costs would they incur? That should help us figure out what our value-based pricing sort of approach should be. So that's step one. Step two is I need to understand what does the market bear, right? Meaning if I haven't done a very good job of strategy and I'm more commoditized, my product or service is going to be reasonably comparable to other things in the market. Therefore, my pricing needs to be reasonably comparable to the market, right? Like if I provide something that is indistinguishable from three other people and they're selling it for $20,000, it's really tough for me to sell it for $40,000, right? There's no basis for justification. So I really need to figure out, that's why I tend to focus on strategy, or I really want to understand how are we going to differentiate in the market? Because once we differentiate in the market, I then make it really difficult for customers to compare me to other products or services. If we're the only company that provides a combination of these three things, if I've really done my segmentation right and I'm going after the right customer, selling to the right prospects, those prospects really care about those things. They really don't have a choice, right? If I really want these three things and I'm the only person in the market, I'm on the option in the market that has these three things, I now can premium price my products or service. So even if everyone else is charging 20% or $20,000, I can still charge 40 because no one else has these other two or three things that I have. So the things that I'm looking for are, do I understand what value is? And have I created a really differentiated offering? If those two things are done well, that means I can work in a premium price category. And there it's basically I just keep increasing my prices until people start crying uncle, right? Until I stop getting sales. And if I'm not getting a no every 7th, 8th, 9th, sale, it means I need to increase, right? Like if people are saying yes to my price and to my overall kind of offer or package very quickly on a consistent basis, I'm probably not high enough.
Yeah,
I probably need to increase 10%.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, if we look at Apple, Tesla, I know they're taking a
Apple. Apple's a great one because if you look at Apple, if you look at their actual owner, how much of the market share they have from a handset marketplace point of view, I don't know the super recent numbers, but 5-6 years ago, it was somewhere around 20%, 25% maybe of the overall handset market. But if you look at their profit share, there's something like 70 to 80% of the profit of the market. So they're only selling 20% of the handsets, but they're making 80, 90% of the profit that's available on the market. That means these other jokers are out there. 80% of the market is chasing 20% of the profit out there. Right. I'd much rather be 20% of the market and making 80% of the profit than the other way around.
And differentiation and value, what does it mean to the customer? What's the outcome, right? That tangible outcome or intangible outcomes that they want to either feel inside or have externally. That's value. What are they getting out of this that they deem valuable? Right. And differentiation is, how are we in the market, I'm going to say, unique in that value proposition so that they understand what that differentiation is. Because I look at things like, let's take automobiles, for example, right? I've traveled a lot, so I rented a lot of vehicles, and I would go get luxury vehicles, premium vehicles, whatever, right? I mean, I would also get regular run-of-the-mill vehicles. And I can confidently say that if I jump into a certain Chevy model, Malibu or, the next level up, right? And I jump into a Volvo or I jump into a Lexus, there's not a whole hell of a lot of differentiation in the riding experience, right? But the price tags are very different. Same. And by the way, all you auto people on the line, please don't send me hate mail. Right? And, Cadillac, Mercedes, right? I mean, I jumped into a guy's Mercedes he bought, and it's like $130,000, and I'm like, cling, cling, cling. It's all plastic, right? When we look at a Mercedes, though, it carries kind of a brand and a kind of a connotation of a brand. Like if you have a Mercedes, you are doing quite well. So that's differentiation in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, and you're hitting on the fact is differentiation is more than, kind of rational, logical, measurable, kind of technical differences, right? It is about perceived, it's about brand attributes, right? These are all things that go into a strategic canvas, right? Things understanding, well, what do people want? Yeah, people want to be associated with certain things or be associated with certain brand attributes or brand values, right? These are all things that can go into this process. The great one I love is Starbucks, right? Like Starbucks has done a great job of selling really shitty coffee, right? It's just not technically, it's not very good coffee, but they have dominated the market, right? Because of a whole bunch of other things that, if what you really care about is technically really good coffee, you don't go to Starbucks, right? But the fact is that the consumers out there, it's more than that, right? It's about convenience. It's about, all the other things about the experience of the store. It's about the qualities of the store. It's about, walking down the street with your Starbucks mug. It's like, it's all these things that go into that process, and a good strategic planning process uncovers that all the different facets that go into a buyer's decision-making process or perception of decision-making process.
It's interesting you're bringing up coffee because, I'm here in the Boston area, right? And by the way, our opinions are just our opinions, folks. They're not the expressed opinions of our company. So keep your lawyers away. So Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah.
We have people who get in fights over how good Dunkin' Donuts coffee is.
Yep. Oh, I've been there. I've seen it happen.
I have some people saying this is spit and whitewash together, that will argue against the cup of coffee, and others who will say you are anti-American if you don't like Dunkin' Donuts coffee, right? So that is the power of value in play. Yeah. Right. I mean, and it doesn't have to just be on a product. It could be on a feeling, on anything. I mean, you take sporting games, for example, like, some people, like, I love hockey and I watch some hockey and I see some of these people coming in, donned in creative dress wear to
permanently mark
team.
Their bodies
to
align themselves with the team.
Right.
Yeah.
and pay outrageous ticket prices, to be there in some capacity. Now, some people don't consider it outrageous. They consider that value. I've actually had people boast about, I spent $600 on a ticket, or I went to Taylor Swift and it cost me like 10 grand or whatever it was. Right? So, where other people will not. So the reason I want to bring this up, and I wanted to get your feedback, and before we conclude here, is perception is in the eye of the beholder, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's why I say is you have to define your core customer, right? You really have to start with, who do I really want to do business with? Because if you're trying to do business with everyone, like, you've just watered down your entire strategic planning process, right? Like, you really have to take some time to really figure out, okay, who do we want to be doing business with? Because that is where you can then get really specific understanding. Well, what do they care about? What do they want to buy? How do they make their decision? And a good strategic planning process will create a situation that you've got a handful of raving fans, a handful of people who are dying to do business with you, to buy your product or service. And you're going to have a whole bunch of people that hate you, right? That's good. Right? Like, you want that barbell, right? You want to create a whole bunch of people that really, really want to be with you. And you want to create a situation where a whole bunch of people don't. And the better you do that, actually, it helps the sales process, because you now have the ability to very quickly filter and qualify your leads early, right? And one of the classic things I see is a company has leads going too far down the sales process and chewing up time, energy, and resources when they should have gotten qualified out of the process very early in the funnel, so they can focus their time, energy, and resources on a fewer set of leads and actually moving them through to the sale.
Right. If we want high close rates, Absolutely. That is exactly how to do it. Right. So there's a difference between conversion and close rates, folks. We'll do a whole new segment on that one. So, Bruce, thank you so much for being here. It's been awesome. I really appreciate. How do people find you? Or, I gave you a website, but if they want to know more about Bruce and they want to contact, because I'm sure you've spun some heads around.
Yeah,
people listening to this.
So the ones that actually want to talk to me, not the ones that are going to complain. Eckfeldt.com is my website. Just bruce@eckfeldt.com is email address. I have a series of podcasts that I run. You can check those out. I also write for Inc. You'll see all sorts of Inc. articles out there that I've written for the years, so you can check them out there. But yeah, get in touch with me. I'm happy to kind of debate, and I love talking about this stuff. So look me up and let's have a conversation.
And no hate mail on Starbucks, folks. I'll put everything into the show notes.
Awesome.
And once again, Bruce Eckfeldt, thank you for being there, sir.
Thanks, Doug. Take care.
All right. So, what are your 2 to 3 outcomes that you want for your company strategically? In every interaction that goes on, you can break this down from interaction to interaction. Now, what do the buyers want? When you match up those 2 criteria, you'll see magical things happen in your company. So I'm going to ask you right now, today, in fact, now, get a piece of paper, get a pen, write it down. What are the 2 or 3 things that you want? Then go test them. Find out, is that what you want your clientele to get from you? And is that what they want from you? Because if those 2 match up, again, it's magical. You have a lot of great stuff going on. Now, when you are starting this process of strategy, especially in the beginning, keep it simple, right? 2 or 3 things. And what you'll find as you go along, those 2 or 3 things will kind of build upon itself. Then you'll have 2 or 3 things more. And so if it ever starts to get out from underneath your ability to manage that, look back at those things again. In other words, you'll see some overlapping themes. So if you have like 10 strategic outcomes for the company, what you're going to find is most likely those 10 will condense down into 3 or 4. And what you've done is you kind of repeated the pattern and you just kind of called it something different. Instead of red, it's royal red, right? But it's still red. And you can kind of bring it in together in most cases. Now, if you're the founder, remember, your job is to create the strategy. If you're the CEO, your major job is to create the strategy. You want to create leverage in the process because strategy will give you the focus to say yes to things and no to things, as well as being able to leverage because you'll know where to put your time, money, and resources into. Now, when it comes to pricing, because we talked about pricing strategy, again, value and differentiation. Value perception of the end buyer is what value really is. What do they get? What do they feel? What do they want? What are they coming there for? Now, it's probably not a product or a service in most cases. It's what the outcome of that product or service really will give you. And the differentiation around that, you must differentiate around that if you want to get premium pricing for your value. That is the key. If you like the subject matter of this particular podcast, please give it a 5-star review. If you or someone you know is an expert on subject matter and you think it would be great for the show, reach out to us at YouMatter, YOUMATTER, at ceosalesstrategies.com. Let us know what it is. We'll review and get back to you. And if it's a match, we'll have you on the show. If you're looking to get yourself into the top 1% of sellers or your people into the top 1% of sellers, no matter where they are in the spectrum, reach out to me directly at doug@ceosalesstrategies.com or Doug Brown 123. That is my LinkedIn. As always, go out and sell something today, would you? Please go sell some things. Make people happy. Remember, selling and sales, it really transforms the world. Nothing that you can look around or touch, and nothing happened without somebody selling it to someone else. But there's a process of doing this. And when you play win-win, that means you win, they win. It is a great relationship and opportunity for both of you. So you're helping people with a problem, resolve it. You're helping people with an opportunity to claim it. Until next time, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. To your success.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. What is something that you learned that you could act on today? Don't forget to schedule it now, or it may never get forward momentum. If you find our content valuable, please leave a favorable review and let us know what you liked. Please also share this with others if the content will help them. For our show notes, other episodes, and more interesting content and resources, please visit ceosalesstrategiespodcast.com. See you soon, and to your continued success.